is Keys to the Shop, Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Benito Burmudez of Cafe Unido in Panama. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me on this Founder Friday episode. It's going to be a really great one. Now, if you would take the time right now to just hit subscribe wherever you are listening right now. Subscribing to the show allows you to stay updated when new episodes come out. You never miss any of the content. Really helps the show as well. So please do get subscribed to the Keys to the Shop podcast. And also something that helps get the word out about this show like nothing else is sharing the episodes and sharing the show with your team, with friends. And when they subscribe, it just kind of spreads the love all around. And that'd be really great if you could do that. Share these episodes. Thank you so much. And now, Keys to the Shop, on top of doing this podcast, also offers consulting and coaching for you and your business. So if you're just starting out in the coffee industry and you want to get your coffee house started on the right foot, or if you're an existing operator and you are looking to improve your operations, your quality, your people, you've got some problems that need some solutions and want some clarity for the next step in your business, or you just want some consultation and coaching on a regular basis for yourself, there's a lot of ways that Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you. All you need to do is reach out to me, send me an email, chris@keystotheshop.com. We'll set up a free discovery call and talk all about what's going on in your world and if working with Keys to the Shop Consulting is the right fit for you. So again, that email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode of Founder Friday is brought to you by the Ground Control Cyclops Brewer from the fine folks over there at Voga Coffee. They have been so busy, especially in the last couple of years, because the ground control is just taking off. People are realizing just what kind of magic it can work on their coffee and just how easy it is to work as a piece of equipment. I mean, it is the next step in the evolution of coffee brewers, changing batch brew from here on out. The SCA award-winning technology gives you control over an incredible range of flavors of your coffee. And this is not only a technological wonder in terms of batch brew coffee, but it also makes tea, batched iced lattes, batched cold brew. So it adds a lot of versatility and efficiency to your bar and your workflow. Go visit them over at groundcontrol.coffee. I highly recommend if you're looking for versatility, efficiency, beauty, and just a quality level up across the board for your coffee, then getting a ground control for your cafe is a great idea. Again, to learn more, go visit them over at groundcontrol.coffee. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series, the line of plant-based performance beverages that is made for and approved by baristas all over the world because it truly performs on the bar consistently, delivers amazing quality, it stands up to the heat from steaming, produces awesome latte art ready texture, and it creates a balanced drink so the customer is not overwhelmed with their selection. It's always focused on the coffee. And that's all very, very important because you want to serve your customers the best. All the work we put into our coffee, why wouldn't you choose a product that has been designed to showcase that work so well? Go visit them at pacificfoodservice.com and get samples in your store. Try it yourself. Have your baristas try it. I think you're all going to be really impressed with what the Barista Series can do. Again, if you're looking for the best in plant-based beverages for your customers and to help your coffee truly shine, then I recommend you serve the Barista Series from Pacific. Okay, everybody. Well, today we get to hear the story of Cafe Unido from the man responsible for its founding, Benito Burmudez. This cafe, this concept was inspired by the great quality coffees of Panama. Benito has a significant history in the hospitality world, even before this roastery and cafe, where he founded and ran an amazing restaurant in Panama. Having been inspired by the amazing coffees being produced in Panama, Cafe Unido was founded in 2014 with the goal to provide a space for Panamanians to learn and appreciate coffee grown by different producers in the area, their distinct terroirs, regions, microlots, varietals, and processes. while also giving back to those growing regions. And over the years, this has evolved from one single shop to now 9 stores, 7 in Panama City, 1 in Boquete, and then now 1 in Washington, D.C. And we get to hear the story of how all of this evolved right from the beginning from Benito himself. So as we talk today, you'll hear all the details about the initial steps to found the business, all that goes into running it, sourcing the coffees, roasting, and how it has scaled and how they have maintained their consistency, quality, and values all along the way. I really love having conversations with people who have done great things like Benito with Cafe Unido in producing countries, and I think you'll find this story really inspirational. So without anything else from me, let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation with the founder of Cafe Unido, Benito Burmudez. All right, Benito, welcome to Keys to the Shop. How are you?
Thank you, Chris. I'm doing great right now here in sunny Panama.
Yeah, sounds wonderful. And my gosh, there is so much to talk about today. I'm really honored to talk with you and discover the story behind what you've built with Cafe Unido. So let's get the story about how you even began in the coffee industry and what led you to start Cafe Unido. I mean, you had to have been into coffee prior to this. So how did that journey start for you?
Right. Well, my house was always a heavy coffee house. My mother is actually from Colombia. My dad's Panamanian. So coffee was always around. But it wasn't until we opened a restaurant in Panama called Maito. And we're always looking for products, right? Panamanian products. We're celebrating Panamanian products. And in those conversations, coffee always rang up. Like Panama coffee was already starting to make noise around the world with world-renowned Panama geisha and all that. And really nobody in Panama was doing anything with that. So it was a matter of like, man, I think Panamanians deserve to drink the coffees that are being sold at auction in Japan. And one thing led to another. We started visiting farms, and that was kind of our mission initially. Like, man, we need to serve good stuff for Panamanians, which is, usually the case for producing countries. A lot of the premium coffee gets exported, and then people are left with so-so coffee locally. So it was a big motivation to start sourcing and roasting and celebrating these coffees with Panamanians. So that's what led me to the industry in the first place. And as I dug deeper, I was really finding out the amazing cup profiles that Panamanian coffee has. And I was hooked instantly, and I needed to see it through all the way.
And what happened between those 2 points? So you explored coffee from that perspective and the restaurant perspective. How did this become a professional pursuit for you that was focused primarily on coffee and not just the restaurant?
Right. Look, I was an investor. This is like 3 partners, 3 of my best friends. We opened this restaurant in 2010. And I was just a partner. I wasn't working daily at the restaurant. I invested. And when we started getting into coffee, I did one class in Portland. It was like a week class, cupping, roasting, the basics, barista training. And I came back from the trip and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get into this 100%. So I quit my old job. I was working real estate at the time. And I was like, man, there's something here. I'm going to see it through. And I took a leap of faith and I went full steam, Initially, we were going to do it from the restaurant. And as we dug deeper and started getting to know producers and seeing the potential, we decided it needed a temple of its own. Like this needs to be its own business. We can't do it through the restaurant. Even though the restaurant serves Unido, it deserved to be its own thing.
Okay, so you went full steam and you did that because you saw that it needed its own place. What about what you were seeing led you to that conclusion? Like what impressed you so much about what you were discovering that you said this has to have its own thing?
Well, there were a couple of things. First and foremost, the coffee itself. I started, and it wasn't easy, and we'll get into that later, because a lot of producers in Panama were used to selling to roasters around the globe, not so much a green buyer in Panama, right? So I was already like an alien going up to farms. They thought I wanted like a tourist visit to the farm, like they do. It took them a little convincing, like, no, no, actually, we're roasting or we're buying greens. So it was the coffee. I started cupping once they started to get to know me. I was doing cupping sessions at these farms, and just I was amazed, not only by the varietals, the geisha and all that, but the innovation. They were doing like some really nice naturals. They're already like ahead of the curve with processing, and I was blown away. Right, like I can't believe this is happening right here in my home country, and I didn't know about this. Also, the fact that nobody in Panama was celebrating this. Like I went to the first couple Best of Panama, which is the yearly auction we do for the best coffees, and nobody in Panama City had any idea that this was happening, that there was coffee being sold for $700 a pound. That was a huge motivator. Like, man, I want my friends, I want my customers to try this, just like I'm trying it right now. So it's like I need to share this. That was basically the biggest motivator to go ahead with it.
Okay, so there's this whole world of coffee. You already had a taste for good coffee. You recognized it through your own experience at the restaurant and also your training at in Portland. And you were in the midst of what I think was probably the middle of this revolution in terms of processing that was spearheaded by the Esmeralda, Geisha, all of the ripple effect of that in the industry till today. And so you were impacted by that. And, I'm curious about your experience in the restaurant and how you built that. How did that experience lead you to make your first steps into creating that temple for this coffee? What kind of things did you learn in the process of being in the restaurant business that allowed you to be successful when you first started the first iteration of Unido?
Right. Yeah, a lot actually. I think Maito, which is the name of our restaurant, we started out like celebrating Panamanian food and Panamanian culture. At that time, a lot of people in Panama kind of associated fine dining with a French restaurant or a Spanish restaurant or something that felt imported. A lot of Panamanian food was seen as mundane or everyday or whatever, right? So doing that was really hard to get to convince people like, man, you can do Panamanian food in a fine dining setting, in a well-cooked setting, So we borrowed a lot from that for Unido because when we started out, I think our first menu offering when we opened in 2014 had Elite Estate Natural Catuai, which is an extremely fruit-forward coffee. Our espresso blend had a good portion of natural as well. So it was definitely different than what people were used to drinking at the time. Which is a lot more commercial coffee, darker roasts. So it took a lot of patience, I would say, just like in Maito. And what we learned in Maito was you got to keep going, You got to keep going. You're going to get backlash. People are going to hate it. But if you have a clear image and the product is solid, people are going to tune in, And we saw the trend in Panama with foodies. We saw the trend with craft beer. And we knew the market was ready for something special, something different. But it took a lot of patience. It was some days I came back home unmotivated, and a couple of days I was like, man, what if I just roast our espresso blend darker and forget about it? Like, man, I need to make some money, Luckily, we persevered, and it's a totally different scenario in Panama 9 years later.
Was that the dominant flavor that people wanted and were used to, that you were sort of trying to, take a stab at making a difference in, like the dark roasted coffee? A lot of people talked about who have started coffee roasting in cafes at origin countries. I talk about a lot of instant coffee as well. I'm wondering, what was that landscape like for you? That made people, hate your coffee at first?
Yeah. Well, yeah, a combination of commercial coffee from the supermarket, Panamanian companies, more than 100-year-old tradition of traditional roast, let's call it that. Of course, we had an influence of Italian coffee, like anywhere else in the world, and you know how it is in restaurants. They give you the machine for the pots, and it makes sense for a lot of restaurant stores to go that way because it's easier and cheaper. So that was like the palette at the time, pretty much what people knew. Of course, there's early adopters that get the idea right away. The older demographic, it's harder even today. But we had to fight with that. We got a couple of European customers coming in that liked the shop, and they, expressed very vividly how they disliked acidity in their espresso. Um, but it was a lot of trying, like, hey, you know what? I know you want to get this, but try this. I would like make it a geisha pour, and just hand out to whoever was at the shop at the time, like, just try it out. And that seemed to pay off. A lot of public cuppings. I would invite people on Saturdays for public tastings. That seemed to help. And at the beginning, I would put a commercial coffee at the end of the table, so you had a little relevance with whatever you were trying. And that seemed to help as well when you put it in context,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so you had two groups of people that you were trying to convince to take you seriously in what you were doing. There's the farmers and the customers, right? So at what point in your business did you start to see that turn around where the farmers were really trusting you and what you were doing and giving you the coffees that you were really looking for, and the customers were trusting you in that, they're open to new tastes than what the traditional was?
I think with the producers, it was a little bit easier. We clicked right away. Of course, they had their not suspicions. They were a little like, hey, who's this guy, But we clicked right away. They opened their doors once they understood our vision. And a lot of them had visited our restaurant, so that gave us a little bit of credit as well. So it was a little bit easier that once we opened the second shop and they saw what we were doing, volumes were increasing a little bit. That seemed to go fairly well, and years later, they're like more than producers or they're partners or friends. It's a friendly relationship. Customers took a little bit more time. Even today, there's people who just don't like what we do, and that's part of. You can't please everybody all the time, right? All the people all the time. So even today, you're like, okay, man, maybe Unido is not for you, and that's fine. I would say it was a solid 2 years since we had like critical mass of people understanding that we were sourcing directly, and we were giving credit to the producer right on the bag, and we were being transparent. So that took about 2 years, I would say, for a good number of people to start getting into it.
What is it about your service in the way that you approached people that helped make this possible? Because you could present the coffee to somebody and you can basically have it be a judgmental situation where, oh, you don't get it. Well, that's because you're not educated like we are. Or you can have something that's a little bit more empathetic and patient with people. I mean, how did you stack the deck in your favor in terms of employees and your approach to hospitality that kind of helped people along in kind of getting what you were doing?
Right. That's a great question. I found early on that you have to be extremely patient and slow with people. Right? It tends to be the norm that if somebody orders something you don't like, or if they want to put cream or sugar on a cup of geisha, you kind of bully them, or you have to just be open-minded. You want a geisha iced latte? Sure, try it out. And eventually that person might move on to a pour over or something down the line, right? So like I found in the first couple months that you had to be like super open to what people wanted without compromising your product, but you can't be too harsh. People learn when there's good mood and when it's friendly. If the minimum snobbishness, I think people react inwardly and they get out, right? So that was a key thing that helped us promote what we wanted to promote. Also, our staff, the early adopters, a lot of people who came in wanted to work for Unido. There wasn't a lot of options at the moment to drink good coffee, so we got a good influx of young people that said like, man, you have any openings? I'm down. So they want training. They were already loyal to the brand and loyal to the concept, which obviously helps when you're explaining a coffee behind the bar. And believe it or not, beyond the coffee, I think in 2014 in Panama, there wasn't a whole lot of options for daily workplaces, co-working type places. The Panama coffee culture was a lot of really old school coffee shops cater more to 40 plus. So the fact that we had a well cured playlist, the spaces look cool, you can mingle with people. That helped a lot beyond the coffee. Eventually, people get the coffee, but it was more like a meeting place during the day. You don't have to wait till night to go out to a bar or something to meet people. So I think that gave us a lot of room for initial engagement, and then people obviously started getting into the coffee.
How do you determine what you put forward in terms of the style and the image that you display to people? Because, like you said, the people who have the older traditional coffee shops, I'm sure when they first opened, that was exactly like you in 2014. It was like really new and hip and whatnot. And now it's just status quo, right? But you come along with this new way of presenting coffee, and it's a scene, right? And people want to be there to drink coffee. And what informs that? And how do you present that in a way that doesn't make it seem like it's just imported from somewhere else to try to stick it to the traditional method, but something that's truly yours and for the community?
I think, of course, you need a read on the market. And if you go out to, I play drums as well. So if you go to concerts or gigs, you kind of read where people are at. But the most important thing was a complete reflection on my style and my partner's style. And that feels real, It's like, hey, this is the music we like. This is the look we like for the shop. Take it or leave it. Without being too radical, of course. It is a business at the end of the day. But it was just like a reflection of us, and people got that. We were younger then, so the question would be how do you stay fresh, right, now that we're getting older?
Oh, okay, I get it.
But at the time, we were part of the scene, the restaurant scene, the music scene. So it was just an extension of us, and it seemed to vibrate and resonate well with people because it felt true. It wasn't forced. I wasn't ripping a Pinterest coffee shop that I saw on the internet. And we got a little bit lucky because in 2014 Panama, there wasn't a lot of options like that. So it was not as much competition at the time. But yeah, kind of along those lines, Chris.
Yeah, well, I'm interested in that comment you made about not too crazy. I'm just kind of curious if you wanted to go as crazy as you wanted to go, I guess. How would it have been different? I mean, what things would you have put in there if money wasn't, if you didn't need to make money?
Right. For one, the music would be probably, a little punk and metal heavy, and
right,
scare some of the plus 30 customers away. We always have this dream of opening like a boutique geisha, boutique Unido, where we just serve 3 drinks, like the geisha of the day, espresso, one drip, and that's it. And if you order anything besides that, no soup for you next, which could happen at the right place at the right time, maybe an extension of Unido. But I more the mentality that Unido means a lot of different things for different people. So I try to always have in my menu a mix that I'm serving the person who wants something cold with milk, and that's got to be delicious. Or if there's a barista champion coming to Panama to source coffee, and they stay one day in the city and they go to Unido, or something for him as well or her. So that's kind of where I'm at, something for everybody, and make it tasty for all of them,
I like where you're going with that because, you start off with this ideal and this image that eventually becomes the image of your customer base that helps you grow this brand. And it's not all about exactly what you want. It's also serving the needs of your customers and some of their aesthetics as well, So, in the process of opening more cafes, I'm sure that conversation had to be had where we started this business with an ideal to make this temple for all things Panamanian coffee. But there has to be more to it than that holds the brand together across 10 stores, right? 1 in DC and 9 in Panama. What is that unifying value or values that really holds everything together that you think about when you're opening these stores?
Yeah, it's just like that. Right on the center, of course, we're feel like we're ambassadors for Panamanian coffee, and the fact that we work with every producer that we enjoy on our menu, it's a responsibility to have that name on our menu board or on our bags. So that's front and center, Panama coffee. Let me talk to you about this producer or that producer and what they're doing. But then again, we've had to, like you say, a lot of shops. You tend to open up your mind a little bit. I love making cocktails, for example, and we just open a late night in our Old Town location here in Panama. We're doing Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We open till 10 o'clock, and we're making coffee cocktails, a natural wine, and some bites to eat. So that kind of thing, like, hey, this goes hand in hand. Why don't we make coffee cocktails? Like, a lot of people don't want to drink coffee after 5, but what if it's in a cocktail, or even just making signature drinks that could be a little bit sweeter and a little bit more the palate of more people, but you make it really nice with Panamanian ingredients, and you source like hibiscus from Panama, and you make a seasonal iced latte. And I can get totally into that. It might not be the drink that I drink daily. I just, usually drink filter or espresso, but I enjoy the process. I enjoy the final product, and you cater to a lot more people that way.
And it keeps the focus on the coffee and what you're there to do, which is to highlight that Panamanian coffee in all different facets, right? And
Panamanian culture, like a lot of the signature drinks we do in DC are Panamanian inspired, using raspadura, which is a type of of hard sugar, brown sugar with orange, and you try to keep the culture beyond the coffee as well, so people get a little bit of taste from Panama.
The taste that your customers come to your cafes for, that creative expression of the coffee, the more modern interpretation of the cafe, I imagine, a lot of the young people that are attracted to your brand, especially, are really plugged into the international cafe scene and bar scene. Do you find that to be true? And is that where a lot of their tastes are created versus the more localized tastes that the older traditional cafes in Panama were basing their menus off of? Even in DC, for example, also that there's obviously a very international city, so people are going to be pretty versed in what's available out there. Is that kind of how people's tastes have developed that are your customers?
I think so, yeah. I think a lot of people who started enjoying Unido at first are well-traveled. They get around. Panama, it's also and just like DC, which there's a lot of similarities between Panama and DC, extremely international crowd here in Panama, mainly because of the Panama Canal. 100 years ago, we have a really unique blend of cultures here in Panama. So that helps a lot. But I agree, people, to get into specialty coffee, natural wine, craft beer, you got to have a little more international approach. And maybe you went to Europe and you tried a wine at a tasting, and you're like, hey, man, I can get this in the U.S., so definitely agree. And it's also, younger people are a little more open to tastes, ferment taste, acidity, than an older demographic who's probably been used to drinking the same coffee or wine for decades. It's a harder conversion rate, depending on the person, of course. But yeah, I agree with that 100%.
It's interesting. I've always been of the opinion that as you get older, you start to, be less open to change and less open to new tastes and things like that. But then when I was young in the coffee industry, I was pretty closed to anything that I thought was not my ideal of coffee. And I'm curious to see, maybe one day the people who come to your cafe and other modern cafes would be open to the exotic flavors of the old coffee styles.
Right. Yeah. We're planning a blend, not a blend. Back in the day, Panama only produced Típica, like a lot of Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
And what my grandma drank here in Panama was, dark roasted Típica, high grown, delicious Típica, fully washed. And we wanted make an homage to that period and do a little bit darker roasted, high grown Típica. Just like as you were saying, like an homage to like the flavors of old,
Sure. Well, the story behind the menu item itself almost makes the taste for you. Now we're talking about the fact that you have 10 cafes as if it just like magically happened. So let's go back to this a little bit, the scaling idea, right? What lessons did you learn in scaling? What was different about operating multiple cafes versus one cafe for you?
Well, in the first cafe, I practically lived there 24/7 for the first couple of years. We were roasting in the back late at night. I was doing barista shifts myself. Even if I wasn't behind the bar, I'd be like eyes on the shop. So you kind of feel like it's an extension of you, and nothing goes unseen. As soon as that's impossible, you realize that, training is extremely important, right? Getting that DNA of the brand to your staff and staffing in general, delegating and trust in your staff is extremely hard when you have an idea, but it's the only way to really grow. So we learned that early on. Luckily, like I told you, a lot of people were starting to catch on. They wanted to be a part of the movement. So it wasn't that hard to staff people that were passionate about Panama coffee. But that was the main lesson at the beginning. Okay, I need to delegate. I need to stop micromanaging, train, take my folks to origin trip, have them be a part of it. It's really important, at least for us, to teach our staff to cup. Because the only way to really explain a coffee or explain a bag when there's a customer standing in the bag rack, cupping, understanding the coffee. Mm-hmm. And I see this a lot at farm level, Chris. I think the most successful farms and producers in Panama, their whole staff are expert cuppers, because they can make micro adjustments in processing with understanding why. Like, I'm tasting this, maybe we should put it in the fermentation tank 2 less days. So I think that was key to turning our people on to cupping and understanding coffee and getting good managers,
Okay, so you had to delegate, you had to train well, and I like the fact that you recognize it's difficult to have an ideal and to have put so much into it and then to relinquish that to somebody else. It feels very scary to do, but you did it. So kudos to you. And then in terms of training, I mean, what did you put together for training and sort of alleviating that pain of delegation that made you confident that it was the right decision and you saw the fruit from that decision to delegate and train well?
Well, we put a program in place that took a little bit of doing. It's a pretty solid program. I have our head barista, Manuel, in Panama. It's my right hand. The guy's a beast with training and all that, super rigorous in a friendly way. So having that quality control across shops, operations, not only the coffee and the service, but the store look and feel and all that. Because a lot of times I am traveling to origin for sourcing or going to the States for now with Unido, but before for SCA shows and all that. So everything had to be relatively safe here. And more than anything, as a new place, because we started expanding early on, it's that story. I think what makes a place unique is the experience and the story. And there was still a lot of education going on in the first couple of years, like I told you. So I needed my staff not only to serve a good coffee and have a smile, but to actually explain it. So a lot of education, and they needed to tell that story like it was their own, not only like a script, but make it their own. I think that's what makes a difference, that it feels like it's not forced,
So you have one trainer, you had a head trainer, but you have other trainers, no doubt, for the size of the company, right?
It's 3 main trainers, including Manuel. And a lot of times I would put people to train in the actual shops at low traffic moments, but getting that experience in shop, I think it's super valuable. You got to feel that rush a little bit too. A lot of people we hire already come from specialty, but getting that rush in on a busy Sunday, that's where it's at,
And you make better decisions. If you're going to train, you're going to have to train people on areas that they need training on. So I imagine, obviously being there, you can see, hey, this cafe needs more training on this or that, and you grow as a trainer yourself by doing that. In the midst of this growth period of the initial expansion, what was the biggest mistake that you made?
I think we opened too many too quick, because Panama was hungry for it. We were the first multi-farm roaster to open up in Panama, and there was suddenly a huge market for it, experience-wise and coffee-wise. So it was tempting. A lot of people were like, oh, I have this new business plaza, and they offered very juicy deals. Like I just want Unido in my plaza, and you go for it. Of course, it's flattering to have people want your business like that. But I would definitely recommend, and it's what we're doing in DC now that we're opening our second one, is pace yourself in a new market. Make sure you nail everything down before you go overboard, right? So I would think that's the biggest mistake. We had some quality issues in some of the shops. Staffing was hard at points. Maybe some of the locations weren't the best. So yeah, that was kind of we closed a couple after that weren't, not that they weren't successful, but they weren't of our full liking, So we cleaned up a little bit. But I would say that was the main. It was like a perfect storm, People wanted the brand. It was a new thing. People were starting to get into Panama coffee and geisha and all that. So I wish we would have been a little leaner, a little more picky,
Right. Well, hindsight's 2020, right? And I'm curious about the closure of your cafes. You said not because they weren't performing well, but they were just not to your liking. How did you navigate that situation? Because let's ask this. At the time you were closing those stores, where you decided to close those stores, how many stores did you have? And talk a little bit about what you needed to overcome in order to make that decision. It must have been pretty hard.
Yeah, it's like, you have an emotional attachment to every shop. At least I do. Every shop represents a moment in time, and you put all your love into opening a new shop. It was a mix of the area where it didn't really resonate with Unido, and the customers that went there didn't fully understand, and they wanted something else. So it was either like we lose our vision and cater to what this community wants, or we just close it, Not a big specialty coffee community here in Panama. Thankfully, the landlords understood, and we put them in contact with another business, so we didn't leave them stranded. But it was a tough call, After that, it felt like a weight off your shoulders, because it was a store that was always bringing up issues like, should we change the menu? What about pricing and stuff like that? So I think if you're honest with your customers, we talked to the community, we put it on our social media why we did it, and people seem to understand. You always think it's going to be worst. People are going to think the worst, like, oh, the place wasn't doing great, or these guys are bailing. But I think if you're honest and tell them, like, this is not working for us, and we're going to open one not too far from here, and people get it, and they're loyal,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And there's an element of pride too. You don't want to admit that something is not working the way you want it to, but you're gaining more by making that decision in the long run versus pulling your hair out trying to make this thing work when it refuses to work.
Yeah, and you're being truthful and human about it to your customers.
Okay, so when you say when you walk into a space and you know that it's working well, like what are the metrics that you use to let you know that a shop is really resonating with the vision of Unido, that the people are happy? Like what goes into you saying, this is good?
Well, there's a lot of metrics. Obviously, the money talks a long way. The place is doing well financially, but beyond that, one thing I always check is the product mix. What am I selling more, and is it in tune with where we're trying to push or to promote, and what is Unido identity, right? So, man, this place is selling a lot of single origin filter coffee or batch or single origin espressos, stuff like that. Community, I think making community. Our first Unido was in a neighborhood in Panama that's not a heavy traffic street. A lot of people said, you guys are crazy. You should open like in a more high traffic street in Panama. And it worked really fine. And it's one of our best sellers because there's a sense of community. You know, there's new people all the time, but you go at 10 a.m. and I see the same customers. If somebody's repeating your shop for 8 years, you got to be doing something right. So that's a great metric for me. And I've seen these customers that return move on their coffee intake from a latte to whatever it is, a filter coffee or a single origin cortado or something like that, you know. And it's great to see people evolving in their taste. Mm-hmm. So those are all metrics I see, you know, community, what people order, the mood of the people, rotation, the mood of the staff, and of course, the financials.
I like that it has a good mix of different both feel and the hard data that to back it up, and you're using your mission and vision to judge what the data is showing you about the purchasing habits of your customers and the lifetime, you know, the length of time a customer will be with your cafe. And earlier you were talking about the passion of your baristas and how that was one of the keys to your success as well. And it seems like that's a common value that you would have with customers too. Like even if, like people said, it wouldn't, you know, be successful, but they, I guess, underestimated the passion that people had for what you were serving, as well as the passion that people had that actually were also serving.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people who stayed there is because one, we know what they drink daily, but any new coffee we get, we go out of our way. Like, hey, we got this new offering on the menu. We're roasting this new farm. Try it out. Or maybe have your daily drink with this espresso instead of our espresso blend. Just for today on the house, try it out. So it is that experience, and passion is super contagious, right? I feel like if a barista expresses that he loves a new coffee on the menu and he means it, hey, people would most likely try it out, you know, if it feels genuine. And I think people keep coming back for that. We try to keep our menu fresh and rotate our offerings maybe every 2 to 3 weeks. So you don't get bored of the same coffee, which is a challenge, you know, as a one producing country. It's like only Panama in our menu, but thankfully there are more producers and young producers every day in Panama, which keeps our menu fresh, and that's a huge deal. People get, you know, bored of the same coffees, same offerings. So I think that also keeps people coming back. But it's all about the passion and how you verbalize that to a customer without talking too much, you know, reading what they want to hear and, okay, that's good enough. Thank you.
Yes. Your hospitality is for them, not to them. And it's a service. Yeah. When you talk about baristas and, you know, being passionate about what they're serving, you know, across the number of stores you have, there has to be a purposeful effort to keep engagement high in order for the initial passion that somebody might have not to fall off, because a lot of times you could sign up with stars in your eyes around a brand, especially a brand your size now, and then quickly lose that in the midst of the daily work. So how does management take care of staff?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially when I'm not as available as I used to be. I wish I could hang out with all my baristas every day and just cup and try different brew recipes. That's the funnest part, you know. Mm-hmm. But you know, I have to be in meetings and traveling, and so you know, there are a couple of different things we do. We have a roastery in Panama City. We run an open house. Any barista can go hang out before their shift or after their shift. We're usually roasting, cupping. So a lot of them come through and hang out like, hey, we're trying this coffee. What do you think? I try to include them in our purchases when we're sourcing, which is happening right now because harvest just finished in Panama. Including them in the decision making for the menu for the whole year, I think is crucial because they feel like they're part of it. And whenever they're expressing a coffee, they can be like, hey, I chose this coffee for Unido. That helps out a lot. And I love getting a lot of feedback, not just me and the green buying crew and Manuel. Getting feedback also helps out. Like, you're right. I think this coffee could really work with our customers. Competition also helps. A lot of baristas aspire for competition. We're doing that in July in Panama. We got our brewers and barista. We do internal competitions to pick the winner who represent Unido in nationals.
That's great.
Yeah, that's always a fun ride. Super stressful, but I think you gain a lot from it. I competed a number of years back in Panama. Got a second place, and nice. It was nerve-wracking, but you gain a lot from it. I would recommend it too. Even if you don't see it as a long-term ideal, I think at least one competition under your sleeve really raises the bar as a barista or brewer.
Is that what you see with your own staff now? Is similar to what you experienced, like raising the bar, because you're investing a lot into conducting these internal competitions. And what's the return on this investment for you?
Well, one is what we're talking about, just motivation and staying relevant. Be a cool place for people to work. It's for them. It's not only about the money. It's got to feel like a good place to work. Competition being one of them. Support from us for competition. A healthy workspace. The fact that they get to try almost every farm from Panama, if they want to come to a roastery and cup, I think it's pretty unique worldwide. I don't think a lot of people get to try like 50 different geishas, in a couple of weeks. Right. That's pretty unique. So a lot of baristas are into that. So I think that's what keeps them motivated, aside from competition. But yeah, you gain a lot from competition, confidence, thinking quick. And most importantly for me, for competition, is being able to express a coffee quickly and effectively. Like you're gonna get this, and having that flow with words that it's needed for a barista champion behind the bar on a daily basis. For a customer who has only 3 minutes while you make his drink, to be able to like, this is happening in this farm. It was fermented like that. All right, enjoy. So I think you gain a lot from that as well, from the hospitality aspect, more than the technical aspect.
I think that there's a lot there with how you've just described learning how to think about what you say and what you're learning and really putting it into an organized fashion is a luxury that a lot of baristas don't have, even at the best places, because you're working behind the bar. Inputs are coming at you all the time. You're not operating 100% in the front of your brain. You're in survival mode for a lot of that time for good reason. You couldn't fault anybody for being there, but the discipline of having that focused time introduces that reasoning part of the brain to this other part that's usually like clocked in, making hundreds of lattes and cappuccinos. And I can see where that would really come through for a customer. There's a little something different about the way that baristas are here versus other places.
Right. And it's now in DC, for example, I feel like I'm starting over with the Panama coffee education and preaching. Like Panama has a pretty healthy specialty coffee scene right now since we started, and there's been popping up a bunch of other shops that have been opening up, and that helps create a bigger market. DC, you basically have 2 minutes to throw your pitch. It's like, hey, have you heard of Panama coffee? No, okay, let me tell you. And it's tough to make it quick and interesting without it sounding like either too long or forced or like you're trying to sell something. So to have a very well thought out 2 minutes to explain a whole concept and country of origin, it's you got to do it right.
Talk a little bit about the DC store and how that came about. I'm curious.
Yeah, sure. So we've been wanting to expand to the U.S. for a while, and I think our year two of Unido Panama, we got an offer for Miami, which we ended up not taking because we weren't ready yet as a business, and I'm happy we didn't at the time. So we're in the U.S. and we got this call from some guys in D.C. who were opening up a market, which is La Cosecha, through a friend. They had a space for a coffee shop that it was originally taken by somebody else, and it had opened up. The team heard about Unido. They started doing research about Panama coffee. They're like, oh, wait, there's something here, man. There's amazing coffee down there. And I actually lived in DC for college. I went to college in DC.
Oh, wow.
So I had a soft spot for DC. Ended up like the guy from the developer of the market went to UW just like I did. So we clicked right away. And it made sense. We were thinking maybe West Coast at the beginning. DC made sense. It's an international market, pretty much like Panama, a lot of embassies, not super saturated with third wave coffee shops. I lived there when I was in college, so, I kind of knew the place. La Cosecha was great. It was a Latin American inspired market with food from other parts of Latin America. Everything just clicked together and we went for it.
Okay, so you went for it. In that was the similar approach that you used to opening any other cafe? Was there something different about the way that you staffed or trained and went about things for your first out of Panama cafe?
Right. So first thing, we were certain we wanted to roast in the States. We don't want to send any roasted coffee from Panama.
Why is that?
Roasting time, it could take up to 2 weeks for a coffee to get there, roasted, and you start serving it 2 weeks in, and then, freshness, first of all, having that control in the States to roast whatever is needed the way we want it.
And so you're exporting the green to the cafe.
Yeah, so we do all our sourcing in Panama. We split it between Panama and DC. So everything is chipped green to the States. We staffed and we brought pretty much everybody down to Panama a month before opening. Like, okay, let's do a tour of the farms, a tour of the city through our coffee shops. And I took them to origin trips. We cupped at the farm. Really was getting people to really feel that DNA. It's got to feel like an extension of Panama. And a lot of baristas in DC already, familiar with Panama coffee. So that helped create a buzz and when we were staffing. But it was wildly different, Chris, than staffing in Panama. Like something as simple as like the signage. I know who to call in Panama for anything, for my sign, for my lighting, for my furniture. So it was like I was naked, like, oh man, who does signage in DC? Who does this? So it was like starting from zero, which was like kind of rejuvenating. It was like, okay, cool, we're doing this again.
You have to wake up those old dormant skill sets. Yeah,
but DC has been great to us so far, and I think people are really, really getting into Panama coffee in DC, and I already feel that. And it's kind of the same gratification when we started here. Like, okay, we started from blank. You say we serve Panama coffee. People say, what, Canada? No, Panama. To now, like 2 years in, or yeah, like that. So 2 years in, people are already asking if we have anything anaerobic from this farm, like that specific. That's always very rewarding that you're creating a market that cherishes the producers we work for with.
So when we're talking about people's perception of Panama coffee, and we then talk about gesha, we talk about anaerobic fermentation and other processing methods such as that, it seems like you really embrace those things as a way to get people familiar with Panama coffee. And then there's a larger conversation to be had around different types of coffee that are grown in Panama, and not just that, because I feel like especially in the industry, that's what you think of. You're like, oh yeah, Panama, Esmeralda, Gesha, and it kind of stops right there unless you really dig. So How do those conversations evolve if you given the opportunity to something deeper than just the first, headline of processing and geisha coffees, et cetera?
Yeah, and I consider those coffees like gateway coffees or conversation starters. Like whether it be at our shops or if we're bringing some chefs to a restaurant in Panama from Spain, like, hey, try this out, and you serve a 90 plus coffee, and it's really wild, and it really challenges the profile of what coffee can be, right? So those are like conversation starters. Definitely, they make noise. They make an impression on people. They're coffees that taste winey. You know what I'm talking about. I don't like using the word funky, but really radical profiles. And I feel like people, when they're starting out as a coffee consumer, specialty coffee consumer, they are drawn to those coffees simply because they're extremely fruity, extremely sweet. They're really easy to pick up flavor notes. So if you're reading the back, like, oh yeah, I taste the cherry, definitely. It's super obvious. We always try to carry at least one washed geisha on our menu, so people get to try what I call the classic Panama geisha profile. The highly floral, citric, clean, tea-like profile, because I think that's what really got Panama in the map. But the other coffees, the innovation, the fermentation, that's fun, and that gets people going. And now, they try it a couple times, they come back, and there's a whole world. Like being a Panamanian who only sources Panama for now, it's so diverse. I feel like you can go from a Pacamara, which is kind of herbal, or to like a super clean geisha, to like a Catuai. Now we got a couple of different innovation varietals. So it's a pretty diverse country as far as coffee cup profiles are. And then processing, changes everything as well. So there's a lot to be said, but I think people down the line start like come for the geisha and stay for the Catuai, like like there's a lot of beautiful coffees that are super affordable, that are just as sweet and well processed as any Panama geisha that you can drink daily, or even just it's funny that they call a classic natural, because when I started out in the best of Panama, a lot of the guest cuppers that came to score the coffee were anti-naturals. They're like, you're ruining the geisha. It's perfect.
Right.
Why do you put like fruit in it? I love the jasmine. And now like natural is considered like, oh, it's a classic natural. Now we're doing like heavy fermentation,
Oh, my things change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's so lovely about companies like yours that have this, what you built, this temple to Panama coffee, gets to explore all of those facets and all these farms that, people in my position in, only in the consuming countries can only see, like I said, the headlines, and you'd need to dig a lot more to find the depth and richness and nuances of an origin, and even to have it available to you might be impossible if it wasn't for companies like yours. So that's really wonderful.
Yeah, and that's one of the main ideas, right? Having a lot of roasters that I respect a lot in the U.S. buy Panama, and they've been buying Panama for years, but they'll have it seasonally on their menu, So it's really hard to find a Panama constantly on any menu. So that's kind of where we're at, or as far as we can take it, given the low yield that Panama, small but having that year round that people can get to try it and experience it year round, I think that's what we're trying to do and get people into that.
Well, that kind of leads me to our last question here. It's been fascinating to talk with you, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. What do you want to see happen in the next 10 years? It's almost been 10 years for you doing this. So in the next 10 years, where do you want to see Cafe Unido go, and what do you want it to accomplish and impact in the industry?
My main motivator was and still is for people to get to know Panama coffee. That's the main idea. For it to be a household name, I know it's not a coffee for everybody, and there's not enough for the whole world. It could never be like a mass coffee, but seeing it more households would be a great joy for us at Unido. I see the company growing in areas where it's a little bit easier for people to try this coffee, like not marginalized people. Like, oh, you don't have an Acaya and a Comandante and a V60 at home, you can't try this. Ideas like because we have a challenge as coffee professionals, that there's a brew involved. It's not a beer or wine that you open and serve. There's always a brew that can really affect the way you enjoy that coffee. So having ways of eliminating that barrier a little bit, like the drip kits we're doing now of geisha, which really makes it easier for people to try. Ready to drink flash fruit, which we are working on. So I see Unido in that direction, and having the shops continue to be a temple, like we were saying, and not overly expand our brick and mortar offering, having more products available widely to more people. That's where I see it happening, and kind of taking those barriers down, that it needs to be this really hard to make, snobbish thing that only baristas get to enjoy. Take down that barrier. Anybody can enjoy this coffee. That's where I see it going.
Well, I'm really excited to have had this conversation with you, Benito. Where can we learn more about what you do? What's the website, social, and all that?
Sure. So it's just www.cafeunido.com. Cafe, like cafe in Spanish, CAFE, unido.com. You find a lot of information of our history, our new offerings, through our e-commerce. You can purchase any coffee in the States from our current menu. And our Instagram for the States is at Unido USA. You can find more information there.
Once again, thank you so much, Benito. It was wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that episode, and truly there's so much to take away from this, but especially the idea that when we think we understand an origin from our perspective, as a lot of us are relative outsiders, in terms of we don't maybe live in a producing region, and even if we did, without the benefit of having a business like Cafe Unido, where you are digging deep into all of the potential and variety that there is within a region, we won't get to experience that richness. And so having a business like Cafe Unido shining a spotlight on the depth of a region, I think is inspiring to have us take deeper looks into other regions and other origins as well. So a huge thank you to Benito for joining us on the show. If you're interested in learning more about Cafe Unido, just go to their website, cafeunido.com, and you can also follow them on Instagram. That handle is just at Cafe Unido. And while you're checking them out, be sure to buy their coffees, and if you happen to be in the area of one of their stores in Panama or in DC, check them out in person. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback for me about today's episode or any other episode of Keys to the Shop, be sure to send me an email. I love hearing from the listeners of the show. Go ahead and send it to chris@keystotheshop.com. And that's also where you can learn more about Keys to the Shop Consulting. Send me a message at chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, that is the end of our episode today. Thanks everyone for joining me in this conversation with Benito Burmudez of Cafe Unido. I hope you loved it. Have an amazing day. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.